Hello and warm greetings from the Asian Confluence. My name is Sabyaschi Dutta and I'm the executive director here. And today I'm very pleased to host a very interesting conversation with two experts on a very important subject uh, that defines the future of the northeastern region of India and overall the eastern South Asian region. A bit of a background for you. Eastern South Asia, comprising of India's northeastern states, the neighboring countries, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Myanmar, extending from the sub-Himalayan regions all the way to the Bay of Bengal, is a contiguous geography. And before partition of India in 1947, uh, trade and connectivity uh, was the region was very well connected, and therefore uh, the GDP of the region was actually much higher than other parts of India. Post partition, because of the political divides, borders coming up, value chains, trade was disrupted. But today, thanks to the various policies of the governments, connectivity is being restored, and the region is now getting reconnected. For example, now from the northeast, we have an agreement with Bangladesh called the Access to Chittagong and Mongla ports, whereby goods from the northeast can seamlessly travel via Bangladesh and be exported via the Bay of Bengal to the rest of India and also to the possibly third countries in the near future. There's also the states of the Northeast are well connected by air, railways. Work on inland waterways is progressing very fast. So, on this connectivity that is in progress, uh, there is the potential to build value chains based on the rich agricultural produce and the farm produce that the northeast region of India uh, uh, has endowed by nature. So, in today's conversation, we have two very senior, internationally acclaimed experts. Uh, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Surupa Gupta, professor of international relations and political science at the University of Mary, Washington. Welcome, Professor Gupta. And Dr. Arpita Mukherjee, who is a professor at the ICRIER, New Delhi. Welcome, Dr. Arpita Mukherjee. Uh, and we want to have this conversation on how we can overlap agri-based value chains on this physical connectivity that is well in progress in the northeast of India. And maybe I should start on that note. Um, can you allude a little bit, comment a little bit on what I just said, and also um, uh, share what you think is the way ahead. Like, for example, both of you, can you share some success stories on what you see as the potential and moving forward? Maybe I'll ask Dr. Surupa to go first.
Thank you, Shabushati, for the invitation. And it's great to be on the same panel with Orpita, who I've known for a long time. Um, so, to get to your question, the Northeast, you know, successive governments have recognized how important the Northeast is, not just for its own sake, but also because of its potential to connect India with the larger Southeast Asia and broader Asian region. And as we are moving towards, um, we as in the as in India, is moving towards its Indo-Pacific policy. There is an economic component of that, which I hope will come through in our discussion. And that economic component is that if you if the government wants the Northeast to be the hub of connectivity for Southeast Asia and the broader Asia Pacific, in that case, the northeastern region needs to be developed. And as Shobhu rightly pointed out, um, agricultural and horticultural value chains are the way to go, because those are the region is naturally endowed with these resources, and therefore these resources um, should be exploited to their fullest extent, and the region can be developed. Um, so that is sort of the connection I want to make before we go more into the discussion on success stories and such.
To
Yeah,
Surupa, and just to set the context of our discussion. See, if you look at a development of a region in the broader concept, majority of the people in the northeast are agriculture is their main livelihood. So if you are talking about development of this region, you have to think about, and it has really not moved into the services part like rest of India into IT. So if you are looking into this region's development, agriculture plays a key role, and that is what from an economist point of view, you cannot have a regional connectivity and growth without looking at the region's development. I would also like to point out that in the past there has been not only a focus, there has been many central government schemes and policies which were tried to be downloaded into the northeast. Probably very early the mega food park policy. Being a hilly region, these lands require a big big kind of a setup, and in northeast it is smaller setup. It has organic small size farms, cultural practices are different, you have to work with tribes. These thought processes were not there until there is a ministry of northeast and there are schemes and policies specific to northeast. So the thought today is on the northeast, but and the thought is also that we know of certain things. We know that, we have identified products like Nagaland chili is going to be, pretty global. There is ginger for certain parts like Mizoram, and there is Tripura. We are talking about Tripura, so Tripura pineapple and Tripura jackfruit. So there are sporadic studies. I would say sporadic studies because there is no detailed study today on the mapping of the entire value chain, where northeast is and where is the northeast potential to not only export but also to replace import. And this is very important because look, northeast also produces kiwi. We are now importing kiwi from Australia, New Zealand and other countries. Like, we can actually, how can a northeast kiwi come to Delhi? That's the thing.
yeah. I think you raised a very important point. There are various parts of the Northeast, which is, by the way, we call it Northeast, but it's actually 8 different states, and each state is is actually producing, or is working on their agriculture policies. For example, Meghalaya is working on a mission to produce turmeric. Nagaland is producing chilies. So many other things. Some of them are even being GI tagged right now. But I think what also is needed is a regional approach, because it's the quantity is the quantity of scale is not that high. So I want to ask you both, and maybe Arpita, you go first. Is how can the region as a whole attract like large investment in the agri-horti sector, given the great
See,
potential we have?
See, basically, investors, they look for, high value product, quick profit, but they also look for information. At the moment, I think the biggest problem is that the Northeast information gap is missing, data gap is missing, value chain mapping is missing. They know there is a lot of excitement, and I've seen a lot of startups and others sitting in Delhi. They talk about, what to do, how do you do with the pineapple, how do we pick it up, should we, and your market is Bangladesh is your good market, Southeast Asia is your good market, but your large part of your high value market will be the Western countries, Middle East, and how to reach there has always been a question for the exporters, and also the question of the scale. So government is also trying to do these farmer producers organizations, but the biggest difficulty when I was working with Northeast, the three big difficulties that I face, one was probably of the data and information, and second difficulty was on the part of the understanding the success stories. And I did came across a lot of success stories, like the pineapple in Tripura is a, it can be developed into a success stories, like you talked about this Nagaland chili. Now even when I'm talking about the global sourcing agents, they are talking about the Nagaland chili. But when you are sourcing from the Northeast, when you understand the success story and you're talking about investment and sourcing, they doesn't only look at the potential and the GI tag, they also look at the volumes to be sourced. That means that, and the processes to be in place. The process means you will need the certification and testing laboratories close to the place. In Northeast severely lack these testing laboratories, certification laboratories. Our various export promotion agencies, their offices have to build capacity. So this, and of course we should be having some kind of a marketing Northeast campaign. What I suggested was that when they organize this world food kind of thing by many organizations like PPCI, they should have a special pavilion for what Northeast can offer, because these are very unique and they are very interesting to the global markets.
Just to kind of add to what Arpita just said, one of the problems that her comments highlighted, and I want to make sure that we stay with that, is that it's not only that there is lack of institutions in the area of like certification and others, but the very challenge of how to aggregate produce from the different states in the region. So, for example, pineapple is a great example. There's at least 4 states in among the 8 that grow pineapple. Ginger, I believe, is 5 of the 8 states that ginger can be sourced from. So, how do you source these? And are there policy challenges? Are there infrastructure challenges? Those are some of the things we need to focus on and resolve before talking about, exporting. One of the things I also wanted to highlight is that yes, there is the huge market outside of India, but there is a huge market for the Northeast inside India. The larger cities in India would be amazing markets for the produce that, there's, for example, there is now a growing organic movement in India, and a lot of consumers who care about these things, who also have the capacity to pay for something that is organic, which tends to be a little bit more expensive often than regular produce. So how do you identify the products for which there is a market, maybe starting with India and Bangladesh, because these are the 2 most contiguous regions if you think about Northeast, and then see how that market can first be developed, and then of course exports are a great idea as well. Exports outside of the country, of course, produce going to Bangladesh is also export. Um, there are a few success stories. For example, uh, turmeric. Turmeric, there was a mission that was started in 2008. It took a long time for the mission to come to some kind of fruition. Now, the machinery that has been invested for processing turmeric, those are now being used. For a long time, there was not enough produce to actually use some of the machinery, and that actually can be the case in pineapple also. That can be the case. So how do you develop agro processing in the region and then connect these to farmers, so that farmers' incomes go up, but also the produce is distributed to a wider market?
Yeah.
Add to sorry, Sabby, please go ahead. I was
No, no,
just
please.
adding to Shurupa that when we were working on Northeast, everybody, you ask anybody abroad and they know about Assam tea. So it's not doable is not the question, right? How to do it is the question. Everybody knows about certain products of Northeast. Uh,
Hmm.
See, the interesting part is no, there are products which the approach to the problem was probably like, for example, pig from Northeast has black pig, okay, and black pig, if you it is only consumed in certain export markets like China. If you go to the rest of the world, it is pink pig. It took northeastern farms a long time, and the northeastern policymakers a long time to understand that this has to happen. Now, even if they are selling to the other markets, for example, if they are selling fish from Northeast to other markets, which is possible, it has a lot of river and everything. But then the food and feed is going to be a major issue. I mean, this is not a major issue to export to Bangladesh, but this is a major issue when you are talking about high. I'm talking about exports as well as exports that is not meeting the demand but also increasing the income. Now, when you export from Northeast to a country like Bangladesh or to rest of India, what happens with them is that they are being part of almost development of a basic value chain. So they know how to cater to the client outside their states and across, the region, because Bangladesh food habit, West Bengal, they are very very similar. Their requirements are very similar, so they know how to cater to a wider audience. This is a very very good practice to understand, but this is not the benchmark. When the benchmark will be the Europe's and the uh, and the US, and we always suggest that select a product from the state, add 5 or 10 products or 12 product into your kitty, and then focus on the value chains of the export with a very targeted promotional campaign for a success story. Because pineapple, for example, pineapple is not only in Tripura, pineapple may be in other states of, as I understand, it is in other states of Northeast, and that can make a success story a wider export story. That was my kind of take in this, my short intervention.
Sure.
Yeah, and in fact, you both alluded to some very important points. One is aggregation, and I must, and one is of course choosing a few products and making it happen end to end. And honestly, last week I think there was a food show in Delhi where Northeast was focused. There is also a big show happening now in a few days. Sial, actually, the big French show which happens is came to Shillong, has happened. Two editions have happened in Shillong. So there are platforms now being created to showcase the potential, but aggregation, as you both alluded to, is a very big challenge, I think, and uh, that needs to be worked upon. Which brings me to my question to both of you, that for example, we need, whether it's for aggregation or for transboundary exports or end to end, we need value, we need cold chains, for example, for some of these products. um, uh, and that requires, if you want to superimpose a cold chain on the physical connectivity that's
Mhm.
happening, um, It needs a lot of macro and micro level policy interventions, uh, both in the trade space, the agri space, customs, trade facilitation, all kinds of things. Can you both uh, allude to this and see, tell us a little bit about uh, where do you see the gaps and where do you see things moving forward in the micro and macro level policy level space, basically, across the various silos that need to be addressed.
Well, if we start at the macro, I'm I'm going to let Orpita take the micro since she's the economist here. If we look at the macro, I guess trade policy itself needs to acknowledge that this is an area that we have to focus on. So, how do we create, uh, for example, BIMSTEC and other um, arrangements that we have in the region, uh, they don't have a specific uh, trade focus, or we haven't been able to develop a trade policy in BIMSTEC. How do we do that? That can be one focus that we begin with, right? Um, in terms of micro, I think marketing policies are one way to focus on the problems. Marketing and the movement across borders of produce. Is there enough of a policy framework that allows that kind of movement across borders? And of course, there are lots of other problems as well. I'll let Orpita pick up on a few of those, and I can add later.
Ravi, when you are looking at the cold chains, okay, the cold chains that it requires, cold chains also require a value chain kind of a concept here. From So you do your for a perishable product, be it a, perishable horticulture product or be it a perishable meat product or a fish, you have to immediately pick up. You have to immediately freeze the fish, put it in a cold chain slot, and the cold chain slot should be moving. I did a study for the SM pig and the fishery sector, and and that study shows that, if you look at the numbers and what they are and where they are, you somewhere there is a land availability, so the person may have gone and established a cold chain somewhere else, which is a little far away from actually where the cultivation is happening. So this the entire process of a kind of village by village, district by district, community by community development has to be thought through. Secondly, if even if you build an infrastructure, if the cost of the infrastructure is high because of certain reasons, that power is not there, so they have to use alternative power like diesel and whatever, the sources are not there. The moment my storage costs increase, the tendency of the farmers in many, especially in many horticulture products, is not to use the cold storage. So this is again a big problem. They will calculate the cost of using the storage vis-a-vis the loss due to not use of the storage, and some calculation they do and then they don't use the storage. This is the story. So not only you need to have a cold chain infrastructure, you need to know that it is running smoothly, and then you need to know that it has to be cheaper. The bigger problem in the northeast was also in terms of the when you talk about the infrastructure, not only the physical cold chain infrastructure, the trucking infrastructure, where from rest of the India, if you look at in northeast, you will see, because the volumes are not there and truck is often running on one direction fully loaded, on other direction empty, the trucking cost is very high, and therefore the cold chain trucking providers, they tend to not go there. Now there has to be, one has to identify which are the remotest part, which are the well connected part, how do you do that, and then talk to these companies, because cold chain is also in India very fragmented. It is not by one company. Somebody is running the warehouse cold part of the cold chain, somebody is running the transport part of the cold chain, so these all have to be mapped. But if Bangladesh is to be taken into account at both sides of the border. There has to be appropriate development of cold chain and storage facilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Dr. Gupta, Professor, you were saying
Um,
something.
Okay, so I was going to add that yes, the development of cold chains is absolutely crucial to this. There's also a need for, um, if you, again, going back to the question of how do you add value, creating downstream um, enterprises. So, one example that comes to mind is that apparently recently, in the last 3 years, the Farmers Commission in Meghalaya has figured out that Meghalaya can grow buckwheat. And as many of us know, buckwheat noodles uh, are in big demand in Japan. Okay, and of course in the U.S. and other parts of the world. Buckwheat is exceedingly nutritious. I can go on and on. But the point is that it's a new product, so it's going to take time. But instead of just exporting buckwheat to Japan, if we could add the value of making that into buckwheat noodles and other kinds of products and then export it elsewhere, that would be another way of building a more holistic framework, development framework in the region. And that can be done around other produce as well.
Sabi, this is absolutely an excellent point that Shurupa took forward, because this is a problem of India as a whole. We export agricultural products. We do not export processed food products, and some of these products are very healthy products. They need to be processed, and processed means you take away a lot of your concerns related to cold storage, cold chain, the entire issue. For example, if we can convert pineapples into something which Thailand does, processed food, this then you are reducing, you are creating employment, you are promoting food processing, you are promoting MSMEs, and you are improving the shelf life. This is not a northeast problem, this is an India centric problem. Like, we haven't thought about how do we move, and why do we face this problem. I'm giving you a very simple thing. Like, we haven't thought about, while we say we can have enough certificates and organic and other agencies today, if you look at our organic certification process, there is Apida is looking the export certification, food safety is doing the import certification. We lost all our bilateral certifications and mutual recognitions with the US, the EU on the process side, because we don't have a single agencies do not talk to each other. This is again a unique problem, and there has to be a platform whereby we build in something like Korea or Vietnam is doing as a part of their trade agreement, is that we sign a recognition agreement with the developed countries or the countries that we are trade. It doesn't mean developed or developing, it can be with any that you want to export. And the certification and every process is streamlined, and our products are accepted. And then there is therefore there is a surety. The farmer is sure that if I do ABCDEF and incur this cost, I'm going to be able to export. This is something we need to do. Maybe work together between the state and the center, put in institutional mechanism, and then between the center and the countries that we are trading with, so that the trade moves very smoothly across the borders.
Yeah, I think again, there are, as you both spoke, I was just noting down some of the gaps or the silos. And for example, I alluded to cold chains because it's sort of, if you can have a successful cold chain end to end, that means we've sort of guaranteed that things are working. I mean, whether it's supply of energy, whether it's the the seamlessness of the transportation, whether it's the timeliness of the transportation, and in all of these, there are various sectors and agencies which need to play a part. For example, I give you an example. Sometimes, we have this. Roads have come up very well, but we have a certain block on the way, like a part of it is not done, or there's a huge traffic somewhere in the middle of it, which overall reduces the speed of movement of transport trucks, and that overall reduces. And as you alluded to, Professor Mukherjee, on whether uh, enough power supply is there, so that the cold chain, I mean, the storage facilities are, the farmers actually use them. So um, so that becomes a very important area. um, and also you all alluded to the
Sally,
certification.
may I add to a point here?
Yes, yes, of course.
5 to 6 years ago, this is a practical example. 5 to 6 years ago, we were working with National Cold Chain Development Corporation. They were trying to map the cold chains, in Indian context. I'm not talking in the Northeast context. And they were trying by use of technology. And the reason for the mapping was very important because we were doing a project for the UK government, and they said that many a times, even if the cold chain exists, and maybe there is a gap, and as a foreign government, I can even fund the implementation project, to match the gap. Infrastructure is not in their hand, but if there is a gap or there is a
Mm,
connectivity issue or funding, the biggest thing is that you can map the cold chain which is by the government, you can map the cold chain which is by the under the scheme, but under the scheme, the schemes don't monitor the cold chain, so the cold chain we have converted into a house you don't know. Okay. And
mm,
then you map a cold chain under the private initiative information and data savvy is not there. So if you talk about the cold chain, entire cold chain, the biggest information gap is probably you do, 70% is private which you don't know, 30% is government which the state you don't know because state has to ask to give that information. Remaining, if you have that information, the material may be all over the place, your cold chain doesn't exist. And when we were interviewing, there were also cases where people were saying, I took my product to X place and then I realized the cold chain has closed.
mm,
Can you imagine the when the farmer produce, they're telling about this, that I saw it in your website and I
mm.
went there and it doesn't exist. So this monitoring review process is very important, Sandy. And in Northeast, probably we do very less surveys for this because the
Yes.
survey cost is high. We don't do that, but these requires organizations like yours to do a lot of surveys to actually monitor. And if you are able to provide that data, now it is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I must just add here, for example, Asian Confluence recently did a study on the potential of this Matarbari to Sabroom connectivity corridor. It can really be a game changer, for example. But the question is now, how do you superimpose the required infrastructure to build seamless end-to-end cold chains on this 75-kilometer corridor, for example, which could be a game changer, because then suddenly Tripura can become like a agri-horti hub and export to Bangladesh and onward. And my second point, which Professor Gupta alluded to, was the value addition. And Professor Gupta, we really very fondly remember your very recent visit to our center. And we had this roundtable, you recall, and Meghalaya government was talking about buckwheat, as you alluded to, and also making wines, different types of wines. Uh, and but that needs a lot of work, which is happening, but also aggregation across states, which can make the region, for example, produce a variety of wines, a variety of products based on buckwheat. One state is not enough to produce enough, so you need aggregation. Maybe if you can comment a little bit more on what you thought about after the interaction you had in Shillong recently, when you met policymakers and practitioners from the agri-horti sector, as somebody coming from outside?
Um, so a few things as by way of observations. First of all, it was very nice to see that there's a lot of work going on. There's a lot of developmental work going on, focused on specific products. And as I alluded to the turmeric example a little while ago, some of these chains and some of these enterprises take a long time to come to fruition. So perhaps if you take the buckwheat example or the fruit wine example, we know there is a market outside, but how do we get it, how do we access that market? And we've suggested a few things here. So first of all, that there is such a lot of activity, a lot of thinking, and a lot of action going on here was itself very nice to see. Second, I think uh, Meghalaya by itself is not going to be able to solve some of the problems, as we've alluded to throughout our discussion. There is a need for a regional effort. So that regional effort needs to be strengthened. I think that was one of the comments, that was one of the observations that I made, that came out of the conversations I had, that there has to be a better regional focus. And there is a Northeast Council, so there is already an institution that can do it, and it is probably doing it, but it needs to be much more upfront in coordinating the actions of the states. Now, we know that states are very, politically, they are very protective of their space as well. So it is a fine balancing act, and there has to be a lot of coordination from the center through the NEC and into the states. It has to be a two-way process. It cannot be a top-down kind of thing, because that doesn't. We all know from our experiences on development that doesn't really work. So those are some of the really big sort of observations that I came away with.
One question, quick question, Professor Gupta, which is, you are based out of Washington. You interact with the, and so does Professor Mukherjee. I mean, you both interact with the international strategic community, and we know that this Northeast region, the Eastern South Asian region, is a vital component of a vibrant Indo-Pacific. In the geopolitics of today. But would you say that there is enough awareness about the we also have an Indo-Pacific, an economic pillar in the Indo-Pacific strategy now. But I mean, where do you see there's enough awareness about the potential of this region and what needs to happen in the international academic strategic community from where you are, Professor?
So so to start off, a few years ago, I was part of a couple of efforts from the U.S. State Department of holding conferences and workshops looking at connectivity. Okay, but connectivity is one part of this equation, as we've already discussed. There's a lot besides connectivity that needs to happen. If you're asking whether there is focus on this specific topic of agri-horti value chains, I would say no. Although in one of those workshops slash conferences, this was really the big message that came through. But I'm not terribly hopeful that that message has stayed or is something that people are busy working on. This is an effort that will have to be sort of bottom up, and the region needs to push it. The region needs others to help it push the message, but it is really up to the region and its constituents to make sure that the international community is aware, whether it is through PR campaigns or through designating products with GIs. Those would be some ways in which you can really showcase a particular, the agri-horti uh, value chains and the resources of the region. But if you ask whether people already know about it, I would say very few uh, already do.
Yeah. Uh, Professor Mukherjee, would you see a point of view from where you are on this?
I completely agree with Surupa, and when the point is like this, that people go to conference, you tell somebody to go to a conference in Northeast, rarely you will say see and no. Even if they have to change flight in Calcutta, etc. from Delhi, so there is a exotic feeling about the Northeast, and that exotic feeling about the Northeast has not been fully exploited. You see most tourists from West Bengal going to Northeast, but you will not see that kind of tourists from western part of the India going to the Northeast. So one suggestion that came out in an international conference was that why can't we do eco tourism, and food and all the eco systems together, and implement few of these projects, like entire Rajasthan did a fort tourism of all its old forts, making half of them into havelis, and that took off fairly well. And Kerala, the Ayurveda kind of a concept, that took also quite well. If Northeast look at something like this, like just not focus on every value chain, but look at the entire value addition and something that attracts consumers to the Northeast. It can include the agriculture with its handicraft and rich culture and everything. I think that would be an interesting option to look into. Having said that, parts of Northeast also face political disturbances, and sometimes what happens is that the negative news go more than the positive news. So therefore there is a very important thing to do. State-wise publicity is happening, but joint positive vibes are also very, very important for the international community.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important point. I think it's uh, agriculture, because agriculture, the communities who are building the agriculture and doing the agriculture, and tourism around the, and community tourism can go a long way, I think, to spread awareness about the region, increase footfall. And I think then also needs to, would you agree, both of you, that there needs to be more literature on this in the um,
Yes,
you know
definitely. More
Absolutely.
literature and more, user community of your agri produce. Like user community, processed food is only one component. Cosmetics company, pharma company, FMCGs, you have the loads where one has to really think through that which is my user community, and bring your entire, including the consumers, and bring your pharmaceutical companies are in the south and west, you know so
yeah.
that's where you need to capture your user community, or your food processors. They may be in the other regions than the product itself. And if you are able to, your big retailers, international sourcing companies, their offices are in Bombay, because that's the entry out. So these are the people who will be actually, the, once they know the remaining things they do. So that is something that we need to really think about.
And to add to that, the Northeast is rich in medicinal herbs, for example. It's rich in organic produce. So that connects very well with what Arpita just said. And to your question, Shobhushachi, yes, there needs to be more studies and, better mapping, as we were talking about earlier. And there are some areas I was thinking, as Orpita was talking about the lack of information about private cold chains. There has to be some push from somewhere to and to get them to divulge some of that information that is not proprietary, that is not going to affect their bottom line, but there can be just informational stuff that can be out there on a website, some kind of mapping that's going to really help this sector flourish. So yeah,
Yeah.
lot of requirement for studies.
Yeah, I think we've had a very, very rich conversation, with so many great ideas. And I hope this video itself, for our viewers, would add, people would get an idea of how many areas of cooperation it's possible to be in, whether it's in the industry or the academia or even in the policy space. As we end, maybe I'll just ask you both to, give your one liners. If there was one focus area we wanted to prioritize on, what would it be?
Do you want to go first,
Just
Arpita?
a starting point to,
One area I think if you want to focus, it would be data and information. The gaps you can meet in every aspect and value chain can be developed. But I always feel that there are product specific value chain, and in the unfortunately in the northeast and rest of India also I see whenever you ask, every state will give five products they want to promote. If you go by the numbers, you have to maybe select one from each state and aggregate it to total 10 or 12, because if you give focused attention, I think there is great success stories.
And yeah, if there is one area that we should focus on, it would be to improve coordination, improve aggregation, and improve communication among the players, among the stakeholders, to make development happen. That would be the point I would like to leave with.
yeah, connecting the dots.
Yeah, but if
Yeah,
you
connect
club
various dots.
everything together, the data, information, and connectivity, which is not only infrastructure but people to people
Soft,
connectivity,
yeah, a lot of soft
business to
connectivity.
business connectivity, all types of connectivity.
Yes, yes, yes. Or as we say, connecting the connectivities.
Connecting the connectivity, right?
Yeah. So on that note, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being part of this conversation, and we look forward to engaging with you for taking this forward in whatever capacities we all of us are in. Thank you so much.